makes this heart beat faster?
Showing off, don't wanna have to wait tonight. Better off, I'm gonna find my way tonight. Talk to me, I wanna heal your sorrow. Talk to me, we'll make a new tomorrow. Talk to me, one night to find the answer. Talk to me, what makes this heart beat faster?
What makes this heart beat faster?
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. I apologize to those of you listening on the, I guess it's the YouTube, or watching on YouTube and watching on, any of the video platforms. It cut off again. This internet out here, I don't think is going to work going forward. I'll be honest with you. This is the third show in a row where we've had this problem. So we might have to look at other things, maybe going back to audio for a while until we can figure something out. I don't know. We'll come back and talk about it. And we'll be also taking your calls and questions. Please call into the show, okay? In fact, that's even been knocked off here. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away. it irritates the hell out of me, I have to tell you, when this happens, because we lose like 2/3 of the audience on YouTube, which is where most people tend to watch this show. And of course, the on-demand, which is the much larger audience. It's most people do not listen live, as you've heard me mention many times before. Do typically the podcast version, which goes to iHeartRadio. That one's unaffected. That is completely unaffected. And so, what I'm thinking is if we can't figure out a way to make this internet, which is very inadequate, I knew that going into this. You knew those were my concerns. We just did some tests and we didn't have any problems until now. So now I don't know what's happening. It's been ever since we started season 6 that we've been having issues. The summer specials didn't have any problems at all. So I don't know what's going on with it. But we might have to divert back to an audio-only platform until we can get this worked out, unless you just want to keep having to reboot the YouTube in part 2, part 3, and hopefully it won't happen again. I don't know. I have to think about this, but it's going to be a problem, and it's kind of disruptive to the show. And like I said, we lose almost our entire audience when this happens. So maybe we need to go back to just being live on Spreaker for a while until we can figure it out. I don't really have the answer tonight. I'm going to have to think about this. We're going to have to talk about it and figure it out. But, $1,000 a month for the next level up of internet is, I think, not viable for the support that this show receives. We're just not getting enough support to be able to justify $1,000 a month in the budget to pay for that extra internet just to provide a video platform for this show. Not when we can do the audio at this level for the price we're paying now. So I gotta have to think about this, and we need to talk about this, and maybe we can talk about the Nicolean Network with other members of the church to kind of figure out what the best course of action is. But this internet's not working for video at all. This is the 3rd time we've had this problem. If you'd like to call into the show tonight, though, because we are going to continue the show regardless, it's still, like I said, we're still live on Spreaker, so that's not affected. The number to call is 347-514-7150. That's 347-514-7150. Enter PIN number 376-8923 to get into the queue. International callers can call free on Skype by dialing up Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER. That will connect you through Skype so that you can call anywhere in the world and not have it cost you anything. You can be, live on the show with us. Now, when we got interrupted, we were talking about how, I did the pig roast, and this vegan was attacking me for putting up the pictures.
Being a murderer.
Yeah, being a murderer.
Yeah.
And I was saying and I was demonstrating how this is an intrinsic problem, because morality, if it's not backed by some kind of religious justification, is really just posturing under the guise of morality. It's not really true morality. And ethics doesn't deal with that kind of thing. Ethics is more about, more of the operations of things, not so much about the rights and wrongs of doing something that is intrinsically right or intrinsically wrong, like a moral dilemma. And Scripture doesn't have a moral dilemma with the killing and consumption of animals, as long as it's done in an unwasteful way. Now, I guess one could argue that capitalism doesn't exactly kill animals in a proper way, and I agree with that. I do agree with that. That's one of the institutional evils, I guess, of our time that we have very little control over. But overall, there's nothing to stop you from being thankful. I remember a mantra that a Buddhist once taught me. The Dalai Lama has to. We were talking about him earlier. Dalai Lama has to eat meat. A lot of people don't realize this about the Dalai Lama. He actually has to eat meat because he's got some kind of health condition that requires animal proteins. And don't let any of these vegans, nothing against vegans, okay? That's your choice. But being a carnivore is my choice. So I respect you, you respect me. But there are vegans that will try to tell you that vegetable protein is just as good. It does not digest the same way. Mm-hmm. The body doesn't respond to it the same way.
Vegetables are also full of oxalates that are toxic.
And see, there's that too. So meat is a special kind of protein that is closer. And I was saying that if you ever have any doubt about whether or not you should do something, what's the right thing? What did nature expect you to do? Well, we talked about digestion, being able to digest both of it. And look at our teeth. Look at both sets of teeth, right? We have herbivorean teeth in the front, and we got carnivorous teeth in the corners and the back. You know, our canines are designed literally for tearing meat off bones. It's not for vegetables. You don't use those teeth for vegetables. Some people might bite into an apple with it, but I mean, really, what are you doing? You're using your front teeth for the apple and celery, using your corner teeth and your back teeth for the consumption of masticating meat. So the fact of the matter is, nature's okay with it. You're not going to be able to come up with a moral justification unless you, out of your own authority, are trying to push your ideology on someone else. And that's where it becomes problematic. But as long as it's done respectfully, and there's, like I said, I was talking to a Buddhist, and, the Dalai Lama has to eat meat, and he would always choose a piece of meat, over, like a dish of like shrimp or scallops. And one time he was asked why, he wouldn't eat like shrimp and scallops, but he eats like meat, chicken, and pork. And he's like, do you not like seafood or anything? He eats fish. He doesn't eat shellfish and stuff like that because he says, look at all the beings that have to die for this meal versus this one. So with the steak, it's just one being that died for this meal. Whereas with the scallops, you might have 6 or 7 of them in your plate. With shrimp, you might have 15 or 20. And so it's the better choice in Buddhist morality to try to limit how many beings have to die for your nourishment. But there's also a mantra that you can say when you are consuming or even preparing an animal for consumption to help them, in the Buddhist tradition, pass on to a better life, so that their death is not completely for nothing, that they can, you can project some good karma to them in this worldview. And he taught me this. It's abhira ke sara is how you'd say it. Abhira ke sara you repeat this over and over again while you're preparing the animal for death, or while you're even cooking it. So just because you didn't kill it doesn't mean you can't still offer it up. And so personally, this might be my more shamanic pagan side than my Christian side, but I have less use for grace at table and more about showing thanks to the animal for sacrificing itself for me. I prefer doing a quiet little acknowledgement for that than I do with, thanking God for the meal, because I thank God for everything, at every Mass, in every prayer. But for the meal, I rather direct it towards the spirit of the animal. And that's how I deal with it. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. It's a wonderful way of understanding what you're consuming and at least doing some good in the process. Now, that's something I would encourage all of you to do. We're talking about metaphysical musings after all tonight, and that's one of the ways that we handle it. So, Jamie, you lost the chat, I'm assuming, so all our questions went the way of the dinosaur?
Sure did, but I do remember one of them. I can't remember exactly who sent it. It was up early in the thread, and it was in reference to kind of the question from the ether earlier. Mm-hmm. And they were wanting to know, how do you know that if a building is destroyed or burned down or whatever, that the spirits there are able to move on? How do you know they're not running around in chaos because they lost their?
How would you? So how would you know in a fire situation?
Right. How would you know the spirits have been moved on, or are they still around? Lost, even more so because the piece that was keeping them here has now been destroyed.
Well, because you quicken the energy. Now, when you scatter the source of the attachment, they're not usually capable of attaching to something else that quickly or efficiently. So when you, like, for example, when we throw an object, a haunted object, whether it be a demonic attachment or just an attachment, to something that is like a doll, or although I don't burn dolls, but so that's a bad example.
I know.
But,
I wish you would, though.
no, I don't. I won't. I won't do it. I won't do it.
I don't like dolls.
I know you don't like dolls. I exercise them and then I send them to Zach. That's how I handle dolls. But everything else gets thrown. Just dolls and stuffed animals I will not destroy. But everything else gets thrown in the holy fire. And what that does is it breaks the attachment point, because they're not able to reattach. Usually there's not enough cohesion left for them to do it. So essentially, when a person dies, usually traumatically, and it has a very short window of opportunity to attach to something. It's usually going to be the location, which is why places where trauma happened, it's usually going to be in a specific location or where the trauma already was. And that's where it becomes haunted by the individual that was killed there. That's where that whole idea comes from. It's actually true. It's not just legend. But sometimes it will attach to a person that's walking by. I remember one of the most horrific things, we've talked about this before publicly, so I'm comfortable sharing this story, even though it's kind of a personal story. I won't give names as to who this story belongs to, but we used to have an associate who was in the paranormal field, paranormal investigation, and they had a son-in-law who died tragically. Okay. He just had a baby. Okay. So this is the grandparents that were the investigators. And he just had a baby. And he was driving on the road and got into a car accident and was killed instantly. Like, I mean, it was like a complete mutilation. There was nothing that you could recover from. You couldn't recover from these injuries. It was too severe. So he was an instant death. At least that's what, the science would say. But amazingly, these colleagues of mine at the time had the presence of mind to actually go to the site the next day after the scene had been cleared. And they turned on a recorder. They didn't try to talk to them or him or anything. They just turned it on and went to the site, and I guess maybe for some closure or something like that. But they had the recorder on. I guess that's the paranormal investigator in them. They were, just in case. And sure enough, on that recording is very clearly the son-in-law's voice, and he's whispering the name of his daughter several times.
Yep.
And that was clear as day. EVP at the scene of his death. So that gives us some insight into that instant trauma, and the last thought on his mind, which was not about himself, which was about his daughter, which was understandably so, and the trauma that would be definitely sufficient to create an attachment. So what could have happened there? Well, he could have been attached to the car, but that would have probably been brought to the dump and destroyed in some way. So that would have broken any attachment to that. He could attach to the location. And that corner could be haunted now by him, just not concentrated enough that anyone would even notice, but it could be there. And it could be something that's so strong that there could be a legend that develops that there's this guy that's, walking around. Or it could have been, he could have attached even to the paranormal investigators that went there the next day, because there's a small window where that attachment can happen. And if there's trauma and emotional energy, that's where it gravitates to. Particularly if there's no spiritual foundation to work with, which I believe in this person's case, there wasn't. Typical secular apathy kind of problem. Okay, so didn't die well, died traumatically, didn't have any spiritual foundation to work with. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. But if we can destroy any attachment points, obviously you can't destroy a person. If a person with an attachment dies, then usually the attachment stays with the corpse still, which is what you saw with Sin City. There was an attachment to the woman that died in that episode, and the ashes still had the attachment. So the just because a person dies doesn't mean the attachment moves on with the person who dies. It doesn't. It still stays with. It's attached to the physical aspect. So even the cremation, you think would be enough to let it move on, but there's still too much substance left. And as long as it's being put on the mantle and said, "This is still mom," there's still emotional energy to attach to. This is why you got to get rid of ashes, because of that problem. Now, but as far as a building goes, if they're attached to a building and you destroy the building, these things are usually already made their attachment. They don't have the energy to create a new attachment, and it will just create a forced dispersion, which is actually, it might sound cruel and mean, but it's actually better for them. It's actually better for them than to let them persist in this state of agony, instinctual agony that they would be not living in, but dying through.
I agree.
Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, and if there's places where violence has happened or death has taken place or a huge tragedy, I mean, going to that place and offering prayers isn't always a bad idea. Mm-hmm. We have an interfaith organization up in North Carolina, where I'm from, that when there's violence, especially violence in the community, like gang violence or domestic abuse that ends up in death, this interfaith organization will go and do a prayer vigil. And it's the community coming together and healing that space and cleansing that space and offering support for the family and prayers for the dead. And what... As pagans, we kind of sneak in there, right? Because we don't want to disrupt anything. It's not about us.
Slide on in.
But what we've done before, there's downtown Durham, North Carolina, and I don't live in Durham, so you can't find me there. But in downtown Durham, North Carolina, there's been a lot of violence in that place. And we have a ritual that we have put together. My death doula, registered nurse friend, she does a lot of civic work in Durham. And we have a cleansing and a consecration and a blessing of public spaces where violence has taken place or tragedy has taken place, where we can lay stuff to rest or clear it out, especially if like something happens in a public square that's so energetically disruptive, and kind of reclaiming that space for the community. Mm-hmm. And so if we had a tragic fire, or like a school shooting or something violent, the community comes together to cleanse that space. Yeah. And I think that energetically makes a huge difference. Yeah. To let the deceased pass on, to help support the family, and to have closure for the community, and then to reclaim the space back for the living. So stuff like that can be really important, and especially if it's interfaith.
I completely agree, because the bishop and I went to Vegas to do a filming, and it was only 2 weeks after those 60 people were killed.
Yeah, I remember that.
At the country music concert.
That's when we did Vegas Live.
Right, okay.
I'm sorry, Ghost Adventures Live.
Right, we drove right by the area. I fully expected to get slammed with energy, but it was actually very peaceful. I mean, they had some police officers, guarding the perimeter and whatnot, and it was quiet. Mm-hmm. And I can usually feel the energy. Yeah. But, for 2 weeks you had all the public prayers, good intentions, the prayers for the dead were done. Lots of churches got together, celebrities got together, and I think that it did help. Yeah. It's amazing what we all can do if we come together, quit bitching about each other, and do something positive for the whole. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do think it does make a difference. And
I think rites like that are kind of a good reconciliation of helping the dead pass on, right? And giving closure to the families. If the community can come together, that can help with the grief aspect for the families. So it makes this tragedy not... It's about the whole community sharing that, and not the family attaching themselves to this thing. And so for your friends, that story is just really heartbreaking. Yeah. My impulse would be to go to that spot to talk to that loved one, offer a candle, to literally feed the dead. Mm-hmm. a thing neo-pagans do and other traditions do it in one way or another, but to feed them, pour them some whiskey or leave McDonald's or whatever that dead person wants, and let him know that he can go. Like, just talk to them.
Yeah.
Even if it is a haunting, sometimes you just got to just say a few words and be like, this, it's fine. Like, your daughter's fine. You're going to be fine. Like, just goodbye now.
Yeah, Marina was talking in the chat. She says there was a shooting that just happened a few streets away from me and young people died in it. When I drove by, I did the eternal rest prayer. Mm-hmm. I thought, you never know.
Good.
No, that's good.
And
I do it whenever I go by a graveyard.
Yeah, and so even if, like, back to the question that started this conversation, if we're talking about like a building that burned down, and you don't know, who might have been there unrested, even though spirit attachment usually breaks up in fire, it dissipates when there's nothing left to attach to or connect to. Which is actually why when you come into a haunted location and you start these major renovations, that it tends to create major problems, is because they don't. They're still attached to things that are there, but things are not they're not in the order that they understand them to be. And because you're dealing with an instinct, you're not dealing with a cognitive thing. They can't be like, oh, I've been watching them do renovations, so I understand this. That's how a brain works. That's not how a spirit works. They don't think. They feel their way through this experience, which is actually a very incomplete. And then it's worse than feeling, because it's generating an experience that is lifelike to them, but it's pure instinct without any cognitive logical function. So it's sort of like a dream. It's kind of like how you get through a dream. You don't make the same decisions in dreams that you make in waking life. You're not usually as logical in dreams, or you might do strange things that you can't do in real life, or you wouldn't do in real life. We probably all had dreams where we there's dreams that where you do things that you would never do in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Like behavior that you would exhibit in a dream that you'd never actually do in real life. And you're like, where did that come from? I would never do that. That's horrible, like cheating on your wife or something. People have dreams about murdering people.
Yeah, I've had that.
Yeah, and it's like, I would never kill anybody, I went in self-defense, I might, but I would never commit murder. But if I had a dream, that was be like, well, that was a weird dream, That's how it is though for spirits. They're not making logical cognitive choices. They're experiencing things through the lens of their instinctual emotive center. And so that's why they connect to emotional things, because that's what they kind of are now. They're just basically a personification of an emotion that's still lingering. And that, so if you destroy the source of the attachment, they go away. But all this to say, would not hurt to always give a prayer or an offering or something to help that spirit move on.
Mm-hmm. Always.
Do we have any other questions?
Yes, not sure. Thank you for reposting the question. Should someone put up protections before meditation? I'm up at 3 a.m. a lot. When this happens, I light a candle, pray for the dead, and meditate till 5. Is this wrong?
No.
Absolutely not.
Meditation is not a dangerous thing at all. And it's kind of, I think, a disservice that a lot of churches have done to act like, even the Catholic Church has taught that yoga is dangerous in some way. It's ridiculous. There's an exorcist, a famous exorcist in the Roman Catholic Church that's taught that yoga is like it opens you up to demonic activity.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, then Qigong, if it wasn't for Chinese Qigong, I wouldn't be able to move as well as I do.
The reason this exorcist has this impression is he's basically throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and he's not looking at the full picture. He's making an assumption based upon a false correlation. You know about false correlations. I mean, you studied psychology, so they're all the time. I mean, when you're doing research methods, you can do studies, and it looks like it's proving something when it really isn't. It's proving some extraneous variable or something. This is what happened with this exorcist. I can't remember his name, but he was teaching that that yoga opens you up to the devil and demonic attachments, and
So does Harry Potter.
yeah, he taught that too. Is that
Do
you know who it is?
He's no longer with us.
Oh, he died.
He passed away.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
I've got a few of his books, but he does talk.
What
about
is his name? I can't.
Amroth.
Amroth. Thank you. And so he was teaching this. Okay, but where he got this impression is that people who are spiritually vulnerable, when they start to go into these high octane practices like yoga and meditation, only enhance those vulnerabilities, and then things take advantage of them, because what they're doing is they're opening themselves up without any kind of intrinsic experience. I mean, I'm going to tell you completely right now, even basic prayer can be dangerous if not done correctly, if not done in a proper spirit, a solemn spirit. So when you treat yoga like it's some kind of exercise activity because you want to lose weight or something, you're missing the point. Okay, you when you engage, this is the same criticism I have with tattoos. People think I'm against tattoos. I'm not really against it. I wouldn't have them. I got two people here that have a lot, but it's not the tattoos that are the problem. It's not understanding what you're doing when you get the tattoo. It's not understanding that you are marking a sigil on yourself and you're taking that energy into you. If this is energy you want and you know how to deal with it, there's no harm in that. The problem is, how many people are that spiritually advanced that they're capable of taking any archetype on, let alone some of the dark things that people put on their bodies, like skulls and crucifixes. And some people, I saw this guy with a full chest tattoo of Jesus on the cross. That's a terrible tattoo. That's a terrible archetype to put on your body. You might think that it's like some kind of devotion to your Christian religion, but it's actually a complete violation of, you're not able to handle the energy of the crucifixion. Do you really think you can? And that all becomes mixed into your pattern, because the archetypes only respond to the symbology of what you do. They don't respond to your actual activities. For you, it's just a cool tattoo. Hey, look at the new one I got. For them, you're taking on an entire life force. Mm-hmm. And they're like, all sorts of energy is going to gravitate towards that. And if you're not spiritually prepared for it, it's going to bury you. And unfortunately, the world today is such that, like I said at Mass, most people are operating at a preschool level of spiritual understanding. You can't take on tattoos when you're doing that. You can't take on high level spiritual exercises like yoga when you're operating from that basic level, because you're not going to be able to handle the energy. So it's not the demons. It's not that yoga is intrinsically evil. It's that the people today are just playing around with this stuff. It's sacred stuff. Same problem I have with recreational use of marijuana. Okay, it's a sacred rite. It's a type of sacrament. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like ayahuasca. You don't just go suck that stuff down because you want to get high.
No.
I mean, some people do. DMT, DMT. I mean, I guess it's a drug of choice for some, but it's a ritual. When you go on an actual ayahuasca vision quest, some of the ones I looked into, because I look into only the authentic ones. Amanda and I are talking about maybe doing this, and I think Jamie wants to tag along too.
Oh yeah.
There's a good one. There's a good one. It's called spiritual tourism, and there's a real good one that I found. And the shaman, it's an actual genuine shaman from the tradition that this comes from in South America. He actually requires that you get there. You're gonna be gone for a couple months to do this. You might never even come back. I know. The reason I might do it, I'm not sure I want to do this because I might not come back from this. I might just stay there. But anyway, he requires that your first week, you're on this strict diet, this bland, vegetable-based diet. You're going to prepare for you're going to have to prepare for that, Jamie, because it's very rigorous from what I understand. Very little food. I may have to
pass.
Yeah. Very little food.
I've been on meat too long.
Because it's to raise your vibration and prepare your body physically for the spirits that are going to be interacting with you, who are not going to resonate with all that dense energy that heavy diets that we eat in the West tend to produce. I know that my spiritual awareness increases when I when I starve myself. It just does. When I eat like I like to eat, that spiritual awareness is definitely tempered. It's still there, but it's harder to reach out to. That's what it is. It's like, don't, these are sacred rites. Tattooing is sacred. These are sacred shamanic rites. They were never done for bodily adornment. They were done as rites of passage to mark major spiritual moments in that person's development. They become spiritual sigils that are permanent reminders of what took place that day. So it's a way of taking the ritual with you. Yeah. The initiation goes with you. If you're just doing it for fun, that's very trivial. It disrespects the spirits, and it can cause problems that will look like, to an exorcist who doesn't understand this, it'll look like you have a demon. And they'll say, oh, it's Satan, he's coming after you, when it's not. It's just you pissed off a bunch of spirits because you're not showing respect, and that's not going to bode well for you. I had a friend once that participated. I'm not going to give names again, but I had a friend once that wanted to understand the Loa better. And I don't know, I don't talk too much about my experiences with Voodoo. I talk more about my experiences with Buddhism. But in Voodoo, I studied that extensively. And I was reached out to by the Loa, and they wanted me to pursue a path towards becoming a Voodoo priest. They wanted me to go to Haiti. This was years and years ago. But I was, for some reason, the Loa resonated with me. They seem to be satisfied with my going with the Christian priest, because I guess it's a close correlation. That Catholicism and Voodoo are very closely connected now because of the integrations that happened. For survival, but they liked this, and they were very much connected to me and stay connected to me, and I would work with them. And this is actually something I don't talk about. Jamie knows this. Amanda, I think you know this too. Mm-hmm. But when we talk about doing folk Catholicism for certain cases, there's certain cases that work better when you're not coming in with the full power of the church, when you're trying to handle things more on a one-to-one level with the spirits. We call that folk Catholicism. It's a kind of a more of a less provocative way of saying that we're working in a capacity of a Voodoo practitioner, where we work with the Loa to connect with the spirits that are causing the problem, and through the work of the Loa, we get them to move on. The Loa help us to do this. And
we had a case in Nevada, a private case, where
they burned a mark in my hand.
That method was used. It was fascinating, the things that we experienced.
Did you see that, Mark? Do you remember that? Oh, you didn't see it?
Oh, my God. It almost looked like henna, and then we had the crows coming to pick up the tobacco I put out for them.
Wow.
Out of nowhere.
People said
it was crazy.
People said on Twitter that I painted it on there.
Yeah, no, I was there.
No, it was very interesting. It stayed for several hours, and then it was like a... It was like a bruising under the skin, but then it just slowly trickled away. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. I could watch it just disappear several hours later. Wow. But it was this mark on my hand.
It's the 3 rings.
The 3 rings. So a kind of Trinitarian sort of connection
like
to
that.
It was like that on my hand. We have pictures of it somewhere. I'll just show it to you. But that actually did happen working with the Loa. Okay, so that's an example of showing respect by making proper offerings and understanding who you're working with. But I had a friend who wanted to do this with me, but she thought it was just the funniest thing in the world. And I can tell you,
it's not funny.
She went through the ritual with me. She was laughing and giggling through it. And I looked at her and I said, "Don't do this. I'm telling you right now. I know, you think doing the drum is kind of a silly thing, because that was what was making her laugh, is that the rhythm of the drum was making her, and that night, she slipped, fell on her ass, and nearly lost her eye. It was just a warning, and to just tell her, if you're going to be this way, we don't want to work with you. And if you do it again, next time it's going to be a lot worse.
Yeah.
And she got the message and never dealt with it again. That's the kind of thing that happens, I think, with people that use these sacred rituals and turn them into recreation or adornment or fashion. Tattoos are not fashion, people. They're spiritual. And if you're not taking them with spiritual purpose, you shouldn't be taking them at all. And if you don't know what you're dealing with and you don't know how to handle it, you shouldn't touch it. Just leave your body blank. Because I'll tell you right now, it's going to be a lot easier when you die when you don't have any attachments to any archetype. You want to kind of purge yourself. I'm always telling my students, empty yourself, for God's sake. You want to how do I connect with a new archetype? I don't like my life. I don't like how my archetype is connected. I can't connect with the right archetype. It's like, empty yourself. You won't have room for a new archetype if you're so full of these shitty ones. So if you're going to be filling up your body with new archetypes, taking on all this new raw energy that you might not understand, well, you're going to be in a world of hurt until you actually learn about what you're actually doing. And don't think because it's Jesus, it's safe. That's less safe. I mean, you're probably better off with like an inverted pentagram than having Jesus on your chest. I'm telling you right now.
You ain't ready for that.
You're not ready for it, So I don't know. What do you think, Amanda? I mean, you work with shamanic practice. I'm sure you have some shaman friends.
Yeah.
How do they look at it?
Oh no, tattoos are. Everyone's going to get the stupid tattoo,
the silly one,
the stupid one, and they always regret it.
The butterfly tramp stamp.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of like the boyfriend that's no longer the boyfriend. Now you get that forever.
Man, and I would not want to have any of my exes attached to me.
Johnny Depp with his wino forever. It used to be wino.
That's right. I back home. There's a tattoo art studio where the owner is a Norse heathen, and the work he's done on me, we establish sacred space. We talk about it beforehand, not just the design, that what is my intention going in, magically, energetically. I will go and give offerings. He has an altar there. It looks like just a little display of tchotchkes, but I give offerings because all of my stuff is done with very specific intention and astrological timing, if I can do that. And it's an ordeal. It is not fun. It's needles in your flesh, and it hurts.
It's sacrificial.
Yeah,
and it's a blood sacrifice.
It's bloodletting.
And I have a chest piece here, and it was so painful. And I went into a trance, and I was bleeding everywhere. And it was an ordeal. It was a magical ordeal, and I feel I couldn't have done that with anyone else. I needed a magical person.
Yeah.
To in him taking that role of the shaman, me taking the role of the aspirant going through an ordeal. I think tattoos are fun and cool, but also like I'm trying to be very careful about them, and just do it with intention. But no, they're definitely ritual. Like witches, no, like we know a sigil when we see one.
Sigil's a sigil,
and even if it's like something stupid like SpongeBob SquarePants, where
that's an archetype.
Like, why would you want that symbol on you for forever?
Yeah, because that's the archetype of like the fool. It's connected to the fool.
Yes.
And so what is that going to actually do for you? It's going to improve your ignorance factor. It's going to reduce your intelligence. This is what that archetype
sounds
does.
awesome.
Yeah.
Why would you want that? Now, if you're going to do a character, I mean, at least choose a good one like Sonic the Hedgehog, where it's like heroic. He's like a hero energy. He's kind of like the chariot. It's like a hero energy. But even that, I mean, would be still a lot of risk if you don't understand the hero archetype, particularly if you're not a particularly heroic person. That energy is not going to be compatible with you, and it's not going to like being attached to you, and it's going to lash out at you because you're not embodying what it represents.
Well, in my tradition with tattoos, if you partake, that's with you not just now in this moment, but it is assumed it's been with you in all moments, past, present, and future, because it's like you said, a blood ritual, in an ordeal that fundamentally changes who you are forever. I mean, as someone who's very heavily tattooed, I'm aware of that. And you know, full confession, there are times when I wonder, like, what choices have I made? What consequences consequences are cause and effect, right? Like consequences implies good or bad. Sometimes it's just is a cause and effect. And every time I get a tattoo, I wonder, like, how will my life change after this? Because for me, it's a sacred rite. It's an ordeal. My ancestors used these as ordeals and to mark initiations or life passages. And it's me getting a tattoo now is like that energy has been with me in all times, in all spaces, in all realities.
It's becoming part of your aggregate structure.
Yeah.
And that's not something that, because I mean, that is what you've got to work with to have what we understand as human beings is an identity. And so as you make these modifications, it's a real, how do I put this very carefully? It's a real, like I said, it's a high octane nuclear way of bringing an archetype into your life. And usually that's not, unless you are a person of high initiation, like we're dealing with here, it's, or a person of high spiritual integrity who can manage these things. You know, Jamie too is a warrior archetype by her very nature. So there's very little archetypally that could be thrown at her that she could not deal with. I mean,
all of my tattoos are Native American, like, protection totems. So
right, and because that's part of your natural energy anyway, it's not going to necessarily create a lot of lashing out. And I say that carefully because I'm not saying just because someone of you out there have a Native American blood and you think now, I'll get one of those then because that should be safe. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is Jamie is by her nature a very strong warrior type individual, and so any kind of negative effect that these sigils could present to her at any point in her life, she's prepared to deal with it.
I've been baptism through fire.
Yes.
I've
and
actually lived and walked it.
And it might, I mean, I say this, and I think I could tell you this. I probably wouldn't tell anybody this, but I can tell you this because you understand what I'm saying when I say this. But I wouldn't be completely, I wouldn't rule out that your traumatic experience that led to your entire, because that was an initiation. Your accident was an initiation.
Oh, I know.
I wouldn't be so sure that those totems were not provocators of that. Because what you're doing is you're taking on initiation. You know what these archetypes are like? Oh, you really want this initiation? Okay, I'm going to give you an initiation. And your life's going to change because of that.
Well, you know, it's interesting when my elbow was completely destroyed and the surgeon had to go in and put metal replacement. So I have a metal elbow and then part of the bone is metal. He told me later on, he goes, as I was making the incision to repair your elbow, I saw your bear paw. And he goes, I knew that was something special to you, so he actually cut around it so it wouldn't mess up my tattoo.
Yeah.
I was like, thanks, Doc. Appreciate that.
There you go.
Well, and there's symbols I would not get on my body. Like earlier at dinner, we were talking about, or after dinner, we were talking about runes, the Nordic runes. Those are beings.
I almost got rune.
Those are entities. Those are living beings that I do not want on my flesh. And I have a lot of friends with rune tattoos, and because it's really popular to make bind runes.
Yes.
And I don't want that. I'm a witch. I use pentacles in energy work constantly. I see them everywhere in nature. I don't want a pentacle tattoo because I'm not sure if that's a symbol I want on me throughout all of time and space. And so, like, even stuff that I really resonate with, because you hear that, like, oh, it resonates with me.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I don't want to mess with that. I don't want to mess with that shit.
When we come back here after the break, we're going to talk about how these symbols that people sort of just think are just trivial, representations are actually living beings that are more real than we are. That and more when we come back after this break. Don't go away.
You best start bracing. you think you could keep us out? Shut the gates, forget us now. Tides are changing. Can you hear the sound? Can't stop us now. We're not back in town, know what we're doing. Things are about to change, it's evolution. Voices shake the ground, you feel it moving. With the revolution. Can you hear the sound? Ground beneath your feet, with a whisper in the trees. Do you feel us watching? Hunger in our eyes, victories on our minds. It's our time to rise. Can you hear the sound? Can't stop us now. We're not back in town, know what we're doing. Things are about to change, it's evolution. Voices shake the ground, you feel it moving. With the revolution. Can you hear the sound? We're not back in town, know what we're doing. Things are about to change, it's evolution. Voices shake the ground, you feel it moving. With the revolution.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final part of Vestiges After Dark. We have been tackling everything tonight on Metaphysical Musings as we talk about ashes and tattoos and the metaphysical effects, but we're going to talk about symbology next here. Amanda just completed a very interesting seminar. I guess if you call it a seminar, it's kind of more of a retreat where, they deal with some Jungian things. And the goal here is to actually understand these things as living entities. It's very important stuff, very important. This is traditional psychology too. So we'll talk about this when we come back. You don't want to miss it. Don't go away. Well, thank you all for waiting through the break and joining us for this third hour of Vestiges After Dark. One of the things that I teach my students in the Esoteric Mysticism weekly webinar is about the laws of magic. And this is magic with a K. This is the real stuff, okay? Not stage magic, and it's not sleight of hand. We're talking about ceremonial occult practice. And one of the laws of magic that is very important is the law of personification. Because what that teaches us is that thought, even if you're dealing with a construct of the psyche, once it separates into a projection, a thought form, an egregore, or Buddhists would call it tulpa, it is now, for all intents and purposes, a separate entity with its own sentience. That's difficult for the Western mind to wrap its head around because we define intelligent life really around through the lens of human experience. So, we might see some animals as somewhat intelligent. We see them as somewhat sentient. But overall, people don't typically think of plants as being sentient unless you're a real plant lover. And, plants are sentient. We absolutely going to be hard pressed to find anybody that finds rocks or metals or inanimate objects to be sentient, and guess what? They're sentient too. Our definition of sentience, which is very limited to just brain activity and cognition, is only one type of sentience. But sentience is a more pervasive aspect. The universe itself is sentient. You would not be sentient if it wasn't, because where do you think intelligence comes from? Where do you think cognition comes from? Where do you think rationality and instinct come from? It comes from the cosmos itself, which is naturally, these are properties of the cosmos. Otherwise, you wouldn't have them. You can't create something that doesn't already have the precursors for it already there. So the seeds of intellect are already in the cosmos, long before intelligent life as we define it was already here. These things are sentient. So guess what? All of these symbols, tattoos and sigils and all these things, are sentient beings. And when you don't treat them with respect, if you don't treat them like a sentient being, this is basic occultism, folks. I mean, I'm not teaching you something that's radical here. It might sound radical to Christian ears who have no occult background at all. But,
Right.
Anybody that has studied even a little bit of the occult in a serious way would be able to testify to how important it is to understand this. This is why you have to treat them with respect. And when you do it in a frivolous, as an action of entertainment or something, well, you're going to be starting to create problems for yourself, and that can lead to these attachments. And then people think, oh, I got a demonic attachment. Well, no, you probably don't have a demonic attachment. What you probably have is a pissed off spirit that now you have to deal with, and because you created a forced attachment by creating a tattoo or messing around with an occult ritual that you didn't understand, that really pisses these things off. You see, because tattooing is conjuration. It's a type of conjuration. It absolutely is. It's just like the Veves in Voodoo.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. So I don't know how much you can share. I don't know if there was a lot of confidential stuff, but what can you talk about this, because you're out here for a reason,
Yeah.
not just to see me, as much as I wish it was all about me. It's not. You're
work,
out here.
work.
Yeah, you're out here for work. So why don't we talk a little bit about what you learned there, because it is
Okay.
very similar to this.
Yeah. So I'm going to give some background psychobabble. So I work as a psychotherapist with, trained as a play therapist, and people are like, oh, so you only work with kids? And I say, no, I work with children of all ages, because even adults need to play. Like, we are hardwired.
Hey, I keep a coloring book and crayons at the house.
Yeah, we're hardwired to play.
Yeah.
And for adults, that can look many ways. So I'm a play therapist. I work with people of all ages, though. And I can literally I'm going to brag a little. I can literally trace my lineage, my psychotherapy lineage, up to Carl Jung, who Jung had a student named Dora Kolff, who collaborated with a woman in England. She was Swiss, and created something called Sandtray. And so what it would look like in my office is you'd come in and you would see shelves and shelves and shelves of toys and figurines and knickknacks and tchotchkes and rocks and marbles and feathers, and it's just shelves of the some people call them miniatures, but in my training that's frowned upon, because these are beings. They are not mini. They hold huge energy.
Right.
And the sand tray is, I don't remember the exact dimensions, but like if you look down, our frame of vision can hold only a certain amount. And so the tray is that size. Okay. So when you look down, you're gazing upon the world.
Which is based on the limits and boundaries of your visual range.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's the world. And so when you look down, you're gazing at that, all of that, but nothing else. And my training as like the therapist, what we call is, like I'm the witness and there's a person being witnessed, is to do my psychotherapy stuff, right? And so I say certain things and certain prompts, and I have certain comments and certain ways of wording things. But basically what it is if any of you were a client coming in, and I would say, look at the beings on my shelf or the figures on my shelf, and it's very more psychobabble. We have like 3 parts of our brain nervous system. We have like the thinking brain, which is about thinking. Our heart brain is about connection, and our tummy brain is about instinct. And so we do stuff to get the client into like tummy brain, instinct brain, or heart brain. This is very much not left brain cognitive. This is not cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right.
And you kind of see like what catches your eye, what do your hands want to touch, what has a story for you. And so what the client does, so usually when clients are new to it, they very cautiously pick figures, but you'll watch them go back and forth to the stuff that they're being drawn to. It's very obvious what they're drawn to. Mm-hmm. And then you say, well, you can create a world in this tray, or tell me a story in this tray. And then the client uses the figures on the shelf. Their figures, when they come into the tray, they're beings. And what, as like a clinician, as a occultist, when they're in the tray, they become those living beings because they are alive in this world, which is a projection of the client's psyche. And they are not the archetype. They're archetypal, but they're not the archetypes. They're a symbol of that archetype. They're a container for that archetype for the client at that time. And you see the client's psyche come out, and it's very raw. And when done well, they don't know, right? Like they don't know what's going on.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I made this beautiful story about like a mermaid and like this evil witch. And what the Jungian folks would do, because my training's the neurobiology of sand tray, would just let the client create the tray and then never talk about it again, right? Like it's like this moment in time. But my training is very animistic. And so I'm trained in certain prompts and protocols on which being has something to say to you today. And then we kind of explore that being in the tray from that being's experiences. And so let's say, I was talking to Brian earlier about if Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and this is from sand trays I've done.
Yeah, right.
And everyone knows that story, right?
Right.
But in my trays, when I use them, I am encouraged to think about what is this Luke Skywalker in this world, in this tray. What is he thinking? What is he feeling? What is he looking at? What is it like for him to look at Darth Vader? What is it like for Darth Vader to look at his son? I made a little, on one of my trainings, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of processing, tired of sinking my psyche. So I was like, I'm just going to make a gnome village. It's going to be dumb. It's a silly little gnome village. And it wasn't. With my practice partner, stuff came up. And I was like, you can't unintentionally make a tray because you're dealing with symbols and archetypes and beings that become enlivened through this process, through this protocol, that even if you're like, I'm just going to throw a bunch of rocks in the sand and I'm not going to build a tray, well, that's still your psyche right there. And I've done that before. I call it my bratty tray. And I sent pictures, like I processed it with my therapist, who is psychodynamically trained. He's trained with both in Freud and Jung.
I see. Okay.
And then he pointed out stuff in the tray that I hadn't seen that to me was just like the hermit's journey in the tarot. And I'm like, this is literally just rocks and sand.
Not so much.
And it was this huge thing. So that's why I'm here, is trying to finish up the certification process. And as a witch and an animist, what I love about this is to me, it's very alchemical. It's transformative. And working with archetypes in a very safe way. I know someone had asked earlier about how do we do archetypes safely? And for me, in my professional job, I'm trained on how to hold literal and energetic space. The tray is a container. When they are done with the world, it is my job to reset the world, and the beings go back on the shelf and they become figures again. So there's a ritual built in around it. And so the client has dabbled in their psyche and had an experience with these beings, the beings who channel the archetypes. The client's not carrying that home. It's been stirred up in their psyche, but they're not carrying the archetype of the warrior home with them.
Right.
In theory, that archetype is already in them, and then they stirred it up a little, and then through the process of psychotherapy, they've rewired, this is more psychobabble, but rewired neural pathways in a safe container, because a lot of times these archetypes are activated in scary, traumatic ways. Like, I don't know a lot about your accident, but I know enough that it's fucking scary, and maybe making.
I died.
I like how she's
I checked out.
Yeah, I
couple
just
of
died.
times.
I just died.
Yeah.
So no one dies in my office. However, through the beings in the tray, there's death all the time in my office, all the time. And so, like an 8-year-old child, can approach these cosmic truths, deal with these archetypes in a safe container.
Because the container becomes, well, literally the container.
Yeah, no, it's a literal
It's
container.
like they can't escape the world.
Yeah.
They can't like attach and become larger manifestations and thought forms that can turn into actual,
It's a
spirit attachment problems.
containment.
It's
Yeah.
it's a
It's like a cell.
containment.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like almost as if you're peering in miniature, looking in almost like a godlike view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the language of me being the witnesser,
Yeah.
I mean, that is, some of the Gnostic myths talk about like the observer,
Watchers.
the watcher, right? Like
Yeah.
that's literally the role I take on. And of course, I'm trained in psychotherapy, so I know energetically how to hold space.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's changing my life.
Yeah, I bet.
So,
I mean, it's so up your alley too.
Not sure. I know you're still listening. This would be something to explore for you for PTSD, bro.
Yeah.
I don't assume the VA is going to offer anything decent like that, but you may be able to look.
Kind of
in
eclectic,
regular-
yeah.
What to look for is look for someone who offers either something called sand tray or sand play. Don't be turned off by the word play. Insurance companies don't like the word play, and so it's my job to get around that. Wink, wink. Don't tell them. But no, and in straight and like it is accessible for people of all ages, all stages of life. And it's I would say for veterans. And we talked about this in the training, just to be careful of because it's in sand, and if you have PTSD tied to the desert,
Trigger.
sometimes veterans want to get into the sand, and then
Yeah.
sometimes we have to offer alternatives, and that's something to just a warning out there for vets, and that's part of creating the safe space is the sand harmful or helpful? In general, sand is extremely regulating for the human body. We offer dry sand or wet sand. And if all you all close your eyes for just a moment and I say you're walking barefoot on a sandy beach, you have a sensory memory built into your body about, I'm just assuming you've all been to a beach or barefoot on wet sand at some point or wet soil.
I'd hope
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And that is regulating to the limbic system. Like people say, I just want to sit on the beach and listen to the waves. Like our nervous system needs that. We need blue space, we need green space, we need the rhythm of the ocean. I'm ranting about the importance of nature now, but this is biology. This is not just my animist pagan bias. But what the sand does is it offers a sensory experience. Not only do I say like, what does this tree feel? Where does the tree feel it? The child or the client has held that tree. They have chosen, or maybe the being chose them, that item and held it and manipulated it. So it's a full body experience, and it's fascinating, and it's been around for a super long time. And like I said, I can trace my training up to Jung, which is very humbling. And he didn't do this, but his students certainly did. And there's evidence for it in our nervous systems. So yeah, for those of you who are curious about archetypes, play with them. I mean, don't be dumb, because sometimes, well, part of being a child is doing dumb things, but like maybe approach them through play, like a coloring book or buy action figures, watch a cartoon, read comic books. I mean, these archetypes are everywhere.
I think it's important to set wherever it's done. It's done in a way that sets boundaries. Do you remember? Well, I don't know how much. I mean, you might be a little young for this, but I know that Jamie remembers this.
Yeah,
but
I'm the old
part of
bogey in the room.
the satanic panic in the 80s
80s,
about
yeah.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes,
you
'cause
probably know about it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
played
You didn't
Dungeons and
live it like
Dragons.
we did, but
Yeah.
it was a real thing. And people were committing suicide because their character died in the story, that the dungeon master would, create this story that you'd have to. And if the dice roll was just happened to be unfavorable and your character died, there were kids that actually killed themselves. And this is what started this idea that Dungeons and Dragons are dangerous.
Same thing happened with heavy metal music.
Yes, yeah, same thing. It's part of the Satanic Panic era. And this is where it comes from, this idea. But the fact of the matter is, they were dealing with living beings. That is, Dungeons and Dragons is dangerous because if you're not playing it within the boundaries of the game, and you're taking it home with you, and you start to become that character, it can reach the point, and you don't think it can't happen to you. It can. It can happen to almost anybody. I'm not going to say everybody is vulnerable to this because, again, spiritual maturity is a big part, a big factor in being able to deal with archetypes. Being a responsible person helps, of course. Being spiritually grounded helps, which is part of maturity. But, again, how spiritually mature and grounded are you when you're a 14-year-old kid? Probably not too
You're not
grounded, probably not too mature. And if you're playing these games with these powerful archetypes, and you don't have the means, I mean, that's just another kind of tattoo. But I like how there's boundaries with this model. And you have a world, you call it a world, which implies that they can't leave the world because we can't leave this one. I mean, yeah, you can go off into space, but we can't get much further than the moon. Mars is really causing a struggle, isn't it? Right? I mean, it's like, I want to see other star systems. I'm done with Saturn and Jupiter. It's like, it's boring now. Let's see something that's out there. And we can't. We can't leave. We can't. I mean, you can't even go to Saturn. We can't even see that with our own eyes. I mean, got to get a telescope, and that's about as good as it gets. Wouldn't it be awesome to be able to go to another star system and see what exoplanets really look like? I mean, that'd be just fascinating. What about these super Earths they think they found? That would be just fascinating stuff. We can't do it because we can't leave the world. We're stuck in this, and so we're beings that maybe someone's looking into this sandbox, right, and screwing it up. I think we have kind of a crazy child that's messing with us. They need some real good therapy because they're doing some weird stories down here right now, and they have been for a long time. But again, all joking aside, the boundaries are important. The play aspect, I think, is important because what that does is it kind of reduces it down to we're setting another boundary. By calling it play, you're setting another boundary that's saying this is not real.
It's not serious.
But see, they don't, when the Dungeons and Dragons, they weren't playing.
Yeah.
That became a lifestyle for them.
Yeah, it did.
Which shows when you become so attached to those characters. And I play D&D.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, yeah.
We all did one.
It's great.
That's
Vampire
great. It's fun.
Masquerade, all those.
And there's even research about how D&D can be great for, like, a lot of therapists are doing research on Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing.
Yeah, role-playing.
But those folks who become way overly identified with any character, to me, they are not in touch with themselves. They don't know themselves. They have no self-knowledge. And they're filling themselves with the character. If the character dies, I mean, maybe they felt like they might as well be dead because that part of them had died and they didn't give themselves room. It's really sad.
I've experienced it on a lower level, not in the point that it could ever grow into some kind of attachment that could actually result in some kind of physical harm or something. But one of my favorite escapisms, and I think it's important for all of us to have some kind of escapism. You don't want to be always on all the time. That's draining and stressful. So my escape, and I've talked about this a lot, is I like space games. I'm a big sci-fi person, just like you, Amanda and Jamie. I like procedurally generated games because I like there to be a certain sense of unexpected realism. So there's this game I play. It's kind of been controversial right now because it just had a major update that changed fundamentally how it works and gave you God powers, basically, because people would mod the game to have these. And I think the developers were just like, well, we're just going to give them to you. So you don't have to mod it anymore. You can play now the way you want. And so this is called No Man's Sky. I've talked about this before. I've even played it on the YouTube channel before. And you are basically this alien that's just finds himself stranded on a dangerous world, hostile world, and your spaceship's busted, and you've got to survive by acquiring the materials that are needed to be able to fix the spaceship and get off the world. And then once you do that, then the entire universe opens up to you. And it's and the scale of this game is so radical that I don't think people can really fathom how big this game is, because what it is 256, I think, galaxies that are all the size of the Milky Way or bigger. So all of the planets, look at all the stars in the sky, the billions and billions of stars, okay? And let's assume that there's at least a planet around each one of them, okay? No Man's Sky factors in all the stars, more stars in the game than are in our sky, by 250 galaxies bigger. And then there's usually about anywhere between 2 and 6 planets around each of those stars. It's a massive game. They said it would take to the year 30,000 for every star system in that game to be discovered by people. It's like that's how long it would take if everyone was playing all the time.
So needless to say, you're going to be playing that for a while.
Yeah, I'll be playing it for a long time. I'm going to need a few reincarnations to get through it. But it's a sandbox in the sense that it's open-ended. It doesn't really have an end game. Your goal is to explore, to find new and interesting worlds. There's procedurally generated planets, procedurally generated creatures on those planets, procedurally generated flora on those planets. So you can sometimes find really strange stuff, and it's fascinating because it's like you feel like you're really going to planet and doing these things. You can play in multiplayer, so sometimes Levi does it, and it's all in VR. So it's not. Well, I'm not like playing this on my monitor. I'm in the world and I'm walking through it. Well, guess what? Every now and then you get a little cocky, and you do something stupid and you end up getting killed. Okay. Now there's different game modes, and one of the game modes is called permadeath mode, where if you die,
that's it.
It erases your game. Ooh. And any progress you made, even if you've been playing for like 5 years, all right, it's gone.
Oh my God, that's just asking
it's
for
hard.
trouble.
It's hardcore. It's to make it feel like it's a real life. And I did this game. I did it. I created a permadeath file. I built these massive bases on these really cool planets. I found a very rare planet with a creature that's called a diplo. It's like this major dinosaur kind of thing. Massive creatures. I discovered it myself. It was my discovery. Your name gets printed on it when you discover a planet, so it makes it very personal. I went to this very hostile world where there were all these sentinel creatures. There's these AI robots that come after you and attack you. I was in one of my exo vehicles, and I thought I had my laser activated when I had my cannon activated, and the cannon was pointed down, and I hit right in front of me, and it blew up my exo vehicle and killed me, and I lost my entire game.
So that's not how I would have said I died.
That's how I died. Yeah, it was stupid.
The
I was
dino
cocky.
got me, man.
I was cocky, and I wasn't looking at my
my
readout to see that I had the right weapon loaded. After that happened, it took me a good 2 weeks before I wanted to play again. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't because it was like, I did all that work and it's lost now. It wasn't because it was like, shit, I did something so stupid. I'm pissed off at the game now. It was because the archetypal connections I was making with my life in the game, which feels very real because I'm doing it in VR.
Yeah.
I mean, VR is crazy real sometimes. I mean, particularly in this game. This game just does it so well that I experienced an archetypal death. Mm. I felt it. And it felt like, how do you start over again from here? It would feel like it doesn't feel realistic anymore. I was playing permadeath so I could have a real life experience, that the death actually matters. That if you get killed, there's consequence to it. It's not like you can just reload the save file and go back. It makes it real. And I felt it. So I'm thinking, if you're a young kid who's spiritually disconnected and you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you have this kind of relationship with your character and then something stupid happens and you get killed in the game, I could see where it would be so devastating that a child who's spiritually immature might just feel they have to commit suicide over that because it feels like they're already dead now. So now just let's complete the job. Yeah. That's how the archetypes get in your head. That's how they mess with you. And that's what people don't understand about these things. And this is real occultism. It's all around us. It's like I get a kick out of these people like the churches that say, oh, don't study the occult. It's so dangerous, that the demons are going to get you. And I'm like, what's really dangerous? Not understanding the occult. Because the occult is there whether you want it to be or not, and it's all around you, and it's in everything you do, from the most basic tasks to the most complex. It's in your games, it's in your stories, it's in your mind. Your mind is occult. The whole thing is a receptor for occult, for the what is understood to be the occult world, the mysterious part of reality that we don't fully understand. It's all your mind is a receptor for it. Yeah. So what do you want to do? You want to be stupid and make mistakes that could end up potentially even killing you? Or would you rather be skillful about it and master it? If religion's doing its job, it's teaching you about everything, not just the nice little neat parts, not just the sanitized version. Jesus died for your sins and, accept him as your savior. Oh, you're saved now. That's not religion. And that's not safe. It sounds safe. It sounds nice. It's a good story, but that's fairy tale Jesus. That's hippie Jesus. That's not the reality of the eye of judgment and the eye of compassion and what those things mean, in the Pantocrator icon that we, have on our chapel that you see right behind Jamie, right? It's behind Jamie, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I bring up No Man's Sky because that's my connection. That's my escapism. That's my, I guess my guilty pleasure, my indulgence. And I'll tell you, I think it's because it's VR for me. Mm-hmm. You really do lose yourself in it, and it's a little disorienting when you come out of it.
Yeah, I bet.
If we have time. Well, no, I wouldn't do this to you. It would have to be another visit. It'd have to be another visit because we're doing Biggs tonight. We're going to show her Biggs tonight, and it's going to be late after that. We're going to go to bed. She's only here in the morning tomorrow, but I don't want you to have to drive that long distance after this experience. But there is a virtual ayahuasca on the VR.
God, later. Of course there is.
So one time when you're here for a few days and you have the time to recover from it, I think you need to try it, and it really does. It blows your mind. Mm-hmm. And it's all just VR. Yeah, you want to do it sometime?
Yeah,
Jamie, yeah,
maybe if I have all day.
Yeah, it's about a 20-minute journey, and it actually starts you in the rainforest with a shaman, and then he starts chanting, and then the VR experience takes you through in first person what you would be starting to experience, and the people that have done actual ayahuasca vision quests and done this VR presentation have said it's very, very accurate. So, yeah, if you wanted to get a little taste for what it's like without having to do the drugs, it might be a good start.
Might be a good way to keep me from having to go on a vegetable diet.
Vegetable diet, yeah.
I mean, let's get our priorities. Is we need to not get on a vegetable diet. So.
Right. Not
it's
me
hard.
anyway.
It's tough vegetables kind of upset your stomach too. So you have other reasons for it.
They're not my friends.
And I mean, I'm kind of that way too. If I eat too many vegetables, I will eventually start having digestive issues. So that's what I was saying earlier. It's like I need to have a balanced diet. I need to eat everything. I need a lot of vegetables. I need a lot of carbs, and I need a lot of protein. And but I do stay away typically from like sugars. I don't have many sweets. I do get a little indulgent with ice cream occasionally. I do like ice cream.
Well,
That's kind of my sweet.
You're allowed your indulgences.
You are allowed. I mean, I'd like to think that I can, every
Nothing
now
wrong
and
with
then.
that. Every once in a while.
Yeah, I don't overdo it, but I try to exercise, although I haven't been very diligent with it lately because there's just been too much going on. Been too busy ever since we've moved here. It's just been kind of go. So, but you can see my treadmill's right over there.
I see it.
Because this is the rec room, and this is just a little corner of it. You guys can't see it, but this is a pretty large rec room, and because we turned the gym into the chapel, all my exercise equipment has to go somewhere else, so we have it out here. And I will run on that. I'll do when I'm in my peak, I'll do about 3 miles a day. I'll run on that thing, and I'll watch TV while I do it. I'll put a little show on, and it's that's how I keep healthy. But yeah, but I kind of eat whatever I want. I have to, I like food too much. I can't do restrictive diets. It doesn't work. Do we have any other questions? We still have about 15 minutes before we're reaching the end of the show here, so we have time to answer some more.
And you may have already answered this earlier. Cheryl had a question.
Okay.
She was curious on how one empties oneself of an archetype.
Oh wow, that's interesting.
How do you empty yourself so you can gain another one?
Okay, emptiness comes that this is where you have to get into very high level praxis. And praxis is the core to how this is done. Now, any praxis that works with this type of thing is going to be effective. So there are some methods that I find better for me. As a Christian, if you're not the kind of person that's very much into trying non-Christian things, there's plenty of Christian practices that do work. One is centering prayer. Lectio Divina is another. Either one of those, if done correctly, can lead to a state of meditatio or even contemplatio, in which case at that point, contemplatio is a state of prayer that is sort of initiated by God. It's not, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to go do some contemplatio. I'll see you in about 2 hours. It doesn't, that's not how it works. What you can do is you can go into meditatio, and if you're making your connections, if you're building your relationship to God, if you're growing in grace and cultivating the grace that you receive from Him, then it can occasionally lead to a state of contemplatio that He initiates. You can't make it happen. And when that happens, you lose yourself. Your identity is absorbed. Christ fills the space. That's how emptiness is done in the Christian religion. Now, if you're going for a real hardcore version of that, Buddhism is your next best bet. And honestly, the entirety of the Diamond Vehicle, the Vajrayana school of Tibetan Buddhism, is going to be about doing that very thing, as emptying yourself. Because the way that they understand the cosmos is that we're trapped here on what is known as the wheel of samsara, which is constantly spinning, and generating karma. Every action you do is creating karma that then has to be resolved. But the process of resolving it creates more karma, so it just keeps happening over and over and over again. And then you can never set yourself free of it. So even death doesn't set you free, because all of those aggregates built up karma, and they respawn again, and that's what reincarnation is. And they come in, and then these aggregates keep coming back, and the result of this is attachment and suffering, because we attach to impermanent things that cannot last. When those things are lost, when they will be, because we live in entropy, we will eventually suffer that loss, and then all we have left of life is pain and suffering. And so in order to rectify this, we need to set ourselves free of our karmic prison. This is done through meditation, high-level meditation, and ritual practice that is designed for the specific purpose of emptying oneself so that there's no karma left. Once that is achieved, then nirvana is attainable. And that is what Buddhism would refer to as enlightenment, because now you understand what you're here to actually accomplish. Instead of generating karma, you're actually burning it off and not incurring new karma. But that's still kind of vague, I'm sure. You're still thinking, well, that still doesn't tell me how do I empty myself of the archetype. And the way that you do this is you have to engage in a praxis that removes identity and all identifications to paradigms and biases. So the first thing that needs to go, and I know this is the one thing people don't want to hear, your political biases need to go. Because that's the one that you're probably dealing with on a regular basis.
Well, it's shoved in your face every time you turn on the TV.
Yeah, you can't get away from it. Social
Yeah.
media is basically just that. You know, Twitter is almost entirely political now. Facebook is largely the same way. So obviously it's the war between the liberals and the conservatives all the time, and we're going to pick a side. Everyone's going to have a bias because energetically you're going to be aligned to one or the other, not usually both. There's very few moderates in the world, very few true moderates. There's people that are moderate but left-leaning or right-leaning and everything else. I was very proud of myself. I took a political test, Amanda, and it measures through a series of very complex academic questions. It measures your place on the political spectrum, and I was almost dead center. I was libertarian left-leaning. Yeah, almost dead center. I was in the square that they call the sane people. Everyone else was
The decent people.
Yeah, the decent people. That's right,
Yeah.
decent people.
It's funny.
I was
and
only a couple of squares away.
you were in the what was the crazy hippie? I forget what they called you.
Filthy hippie.
Filthy hippie. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
She was a filthy, but she was also Jamie was also left-leaning libertarian. I like the test because what people think of as left and right traditionally is actually not accurate. It's really more about how authoritarian you are versus how libertarian you are. If you're very liberty-oriented, left and right agree very much in a lot of respects. But if you're authoritarian in your approach to politics, then you're going to see the divide much wider. So left and right is more severe because it's about control. It's about, I need you to think like I think. And if you're not an ally, then you're my enemy. And that is the first step.
Right.
Because think about, listen to that sentence. If you're not my ally, you're my enemy. You're in my identities. Ally is an identity. All right? Enemy, an identity. And none of these things exist. There's just wholeness. That's enlightenment, to understand and be able to see it. It's not just to be told it by somebody who's spiritually advanced and says, oh, I am enlightened and I have seen the wholeness of all things. You have to experience it in order to truly be enlightened. You're not enlightened by virtue of the knowledge and say that's out there. You have to experience it. You can't experience as long as you identify. So this is the biggest problem for students. Because students will always come to me. I'm no good at this. I suck. I don't know why I use the tarot. It only lies to me. This is a common thing I see over and over and over and over again. When in reality, think about what you're telling me. I am no good. Those are judgment calls. Those are identifications. You're creating a reality. You're already writing your story. How can you bring in a new archetype when you've already created a story? The archetype needs the clean slate. It can't work there's no room for it to work. You've already filled up your aggregate structure to a point that is not functional in any way for the archetype. So the archetype avoids you. And then what you have left is just your core archetype that you're stuck with. And typically, if you're having a hard time, your core archetype needs to be changed. Because the problems that happen in life, the things when you feel disconnected and you feel like the world's against you and people will say, I have all this bad luck. Can you help me with fix my bad luck? Nothing ever goes right for me. When you have people that say, all it is that their core archetype is just not going to realize where their happiness is. It's just they got stuck with an archetype that just doesn't produce that. So what they have to do is change it. But you have to empty yourself in order to make room for the new one to come in. And if you're always talking about me, and I, and I, this is good and this is bad, well, you're never going to get anywhere because you're just creating new identities that just creates a reinforcement of the core archetype that you already have identified with. And the negativity just breeds more negativity. This is where I disagree with the power of positive thinking and The Secret and all that stuff, where it makes it seem like all you have to do is believe. If I believe it's true, it will make it happen. I can attract things by being positive. no, you got to be a hell of a lot more positive. You got to be a lot more than just positive. You need to be a lot more than just believe in these things. In fact, belief is actually another kind of identification. So I'd say just get rid of that one altogether. What you need to do is reach a point where you are so empty that when the new archetype comes in, you can't tell the difference between what the archetype did and what you've done. Where you're not even looking at identification anymore. You're just looking at your reality as you see it objectively, but from the outside. And so it becomes less about I and me and you and them, and a lot more about intrinsic reality, which I guess is more about us and we. If you're going to have to use some kind of identifier, it's us and we always. It's only ever been us and we. This is what the church teaches too. By the way, if you're thinking, oh my God, the bishop's going off on, he's becoming a little too esoteric. No, I mean, what do you think the church is? When Jesus is giving like the parable, the vine and the branches, and what do you think all that means? Why do we say that the church is not a building? The church is us. That's this state of wholeness. Every divine master, from Jesus to Krishna to Buddha, I don't care which one you like and pick, they all teach the state of wholeness is the true condition, and everything else is a manufactured, broken shadow of it. So in order to get empty, you're going to need to get closer to that reality and get a whole lot less away from everything that you identify with, which is everything. And politics is one of them. Religion's another. I always say, throw your beliefs away. You believe in Jesus? Throw that away. Just know Jesus. You don't need to believe in him. Just know him. That's it. That's as far as it needs to go. When you start believing, then you manufacture a dummy version. It becomes what you end up being is you create an idol. And you start worshiping what you want Jesus to be for you instead of the real one. So you can't believe in Jesus. Believing in Jesus is actually going to be harmful to your spiritual health. What you need to do is know him. And that's how you do everything. That's the religious way. What about politics? Well, don't identify liberal, don't identify conservative. Work with what functions best for that particular moment in time. Sometimes it's going to be the conservative that you need more. Sometimes you're going to need the liberal more. Sometimes if you get too much liberal, then you move too fast and then, you create chaos. Sometimes if you get too much conservative, you don't move at all and you become stagnant and stale. I think that's Russia's problem. Too conservative. That's why they're in this crisis now, and they're acting out and doing crazy things, because they've been under the influence of conservative control for so long that they've become stagnant and obsolete. As obsolete as their military appears to be. I mean, honestly, it's a joke. It's actually scary. It's so horrible. But look at what happens when you get too much radical progressive influence. Then it starts to create chaos. Because the world's not ready to move that fast. Yeah. You can't. You have to process. You have to integrate. You need time to do those things. So you need just a little bit of the liberal at certain times. You need just enough conservative to hold it back and keep it in check. And if you become one or the other, you can't. Then you don't think you can be both, and you can't. You can't believe in both. It would be contradictory to a linear being to believe in both. But what you can do is you can go with function, and that's removing the identity out of it. Who cares if you're a conservative or liberal? I don't give a damn if you are. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. What works? Well, maybe it's the Republican that works this time. Maybe it's the Democrat that works this time. I don't know. But, I think in this particular case, people are going to, my conservative audience is going to hate me for this. I don't like Biden any more than you do, but I think that it was the right choice out of the two for right now. Because I think another 4 years of Trump would have been way too radical, and it would have been disastrous. He moved things too far into an extreme category. You can't do that quickly.
We're not exactly doing well now either, though.
No, but we're doing a lot better than we would have ended up. I can guarantee you that. And I know people don't want to hear that because they don't like Biden. Even the liberals don't like Biden.
Oh, I'm not a Democrat. Okay, I'm independent.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Only
don't.
sane people.
Come to the
do.
libertarians. We have cookies.
We have cookies. Yeah.
Just to say, on like,
But isn't that you? By being an independent, isn't that you as the result of your work of emptying yourself?
well, it's
Because
the
it's a
result
kind
of.
of it's kind of not an identifier, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's the choice of not choosing, which in itself is a choice. But I was going to say it's because I think Democrats and Republicans are both fucking idiots. But,
Wings of the same butter.
but,
See,
but,
we agree on so much.
but,
See?
but my point was going to say, like, I voted for Biden, and I don't love him.
A lot of
but-
people say that.
But also, like, to what you said is, you know, like, you don't love Biden, but I don't know, the function of Biden did a thing.
Yep. And I would actually argue that in the first 2 years of Trump, it was what the world needed after the extremes of Obama for 8 years. It has to have that ebb and flow. The problem is Trump went radical. And that's where it went wrong. You know, and I don't think you can't have that. Now, I know people love him. I know a lot of my audience loves him. And, you know, you can love them. Just don't identify with them, okay? Don't identify with that mentality because you can't be empty if you're doing that. You can appreciate his tactic. I did definitely like the fact that he was a no bullshit kind of person, but he was a little too much bullshit in other ways. And the world can't have that kind. You need something much more level, much more able to work in a balanced way, and I just didn't see that with him or Obama. You know, I think actually Biden does, dare I say, a better job of that, but not by much. You know, we haven't had good candidates for a long time is part of the problem.
That
We
I
need
can
better
agree
people.
with.
We need better people. We need younger people.
Yeah.
We need younger people. We got to get rid of these.
Spike Cohen.
Yeah, Spike Cohen would have been
Spike
perfect.
Cohen.
Anyway, guys, oh man, I'm sorry that the feed cut out. I'm sorry. You know, I really hate the fact that it does that sometimes, but you know, I'm going to see what we can do. I'm going to talk to the Nicolayan Network and see what we want to work on or work towards, because this isn't working. We can't have the feed keep cutting out like that. Fortunately, Spreaker has maintained its consistency because it's a very much lower demand on the bandwidth. We're going to be back on Tuesday with a brand new episode with Tony Burkett. You remember him? The funny guy, the comedian. You know, we're going to have some good times. He has a new haunting story for us, so it's going to be kind of a lighter episode, I guess. And hopefully we won't cut out. But keep the Spreaker link handy just in case, so that you can always go there and at least listen if the feed cuts out with the video. I'm going to work on it. I'm going to see what I can do. I'm going to call AT&T and see if they can fix this. I think it's because we're just in the middle of nowhere and the internet's just not good in the country. Simple as that, you know. But I mean, I'm going to see what I can do. All right, guys. Thank
buddy.
you,
Take
Amanda.
care.
Thank you, Jamie.
Sir.
We're going to go now have a cocktail and watch horror and Biggs and go to sleep. Take care. God bless, and I'll see you out there in the ether.
Bye-bye.